Good morning. This video shows two concepts that are important for statics, and it's important to get these two concepts at the beginning of the semester so you can report your results correctly in homework and in exams. I'm not covering all the information that is in the introduction chapters of the class notes, so I do want to encourage you to go and read those. That chapter has some other important information. For example, it gives you some tips about how to study for statics. It gives you some information about how should you take notes or some recommendations about that. And it also gives you some information about how do you attempt homework in statics. So those are important information that is written in the class notes. I'm not going to repeat it in here in this video. In this video, I do want to highlight two important concepts. One of them is the concept of units, and the second one is the concept of significant figures. So let me start with the idea of units. So we're looking at units. One of the things I like to say is every number in statics is going to have a first name and a last name, and the first name is the actual number and the last name is unit. So everything or almost everything will be related to units. There might be a couple of quantities that have no units in statics, but almost all of them will have units. When we look at units, we have two different types of systems. We have the English system and the metric system. So if we do a table that looks something like this, we have the English system in this row, and we have here the metric system or the international system in that other row. Then we can actually look at the different units that are used for different things. For example, if we're looking at units of length, we have that for the English system, that will be feet. We're going to use FT as the short for feet in homework and in exams. In the metric system, we have meter. We're gonna use an M. It's not an MT or a capital M, is our lowercase m that we're gonna use for meter. When we look at time, we use seconds for both of them. And the short is going to be S. For mass, now in some cases you might have heard the use of pounds for mass. In reality, for the English system, we have slugs. And the short is actually just slug. People use slug. And for the metric system, we're going to have kilograms. And the short version for this is kg. And then for force, for the English system, we're going to use pound, and the short is LB. And for the metric system is going to be Newton, and short is a capital N in that case. So I wanted to highlight this table. It's an important table that we're going to use constantly. Just to indicate what are the units for different type of calculations that we are using. So keep this in mind as you solve problems or you study for the exam. One of the things that I think is important to kind of recognize in this is that the base units for each of the systems is different. For the metric system, we have the length, time, and kilogram as our base units, and then the force is a drive unit. And for the English system, we have length, we have time, but we have force as our base unit, right? So here our star indicate base units. You can read a little bit more about that in the class notes. All right, so when we're doing calculations in statics, the other important part is to be able to report the numbers with the appropriate number of significant figures. The main reason for that is if we have a calculation that is, let's say 10 divided by 3, the question is how many significant figures I'm going to report. And we want to report 4 significant figures for intermediate calculations and 3 significant figures for final results. That's going to be the rule of thumb. And I think for most cases, at least in civil and environmental engineering, that's going to be the case. There will be some exceptions. In some cases, you need to be more accurate, but in most cases, that's going to be a good rule of thumb. So what does that mean? So that means that if I am going to have a couple of examples. So 4 significant figures for intermediate calculations. What does that mean? Let's say that I have that A is 10 over 3. So if I want to write that down as a decimal, that will be 3.333. And let's say that that's a force. Let's say that that's newtons, right? So in this case, I'm using 1, 2, 3, 4 significant figures in my calculations, and I have my units. For final calculations, we're going to use 3 sig figures. So at the end of the problem, the important number that you get, let's say there was also 10 over 3. In that case, we want to report 3.33 newtons, right? So 1, 2, 3. Now, what happens if I have, let's say, B is 1,000 divided by 3? In that case, I need to report 333 newtons. So again, those are 3 significant figures. So keep in mind also when you work in your homework and also for your exams. This is the appropriate way to report calculations in statics.